Good evening, folks, and thank you for joining us tonight for our Master Plan Update Steering Committee meeting. Apologize for being a little bit late, but a couple logistics issues took place. Our consultants got a flat tire, so it's just getting everything together. We certainly have Eric here with us tonight, and Judy will join us a little bit later. But with that, Mike, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okey-doke. We'll have some introductions, an update on the results of the planning charrettes that we had the weekend of September 30th and 1st, and the second one the weekend of October 14th and 15th. Our consultant this evening is going to talk us through a little bit on the existing conditions sections update, and we'll have some comments on the format and the deadlines associated with that. And then we'll be setting a date for the December public forum and a location and time to go along with that. The content and format that'll be there, and then any board business that we need to conduct, and then we'll adjourn. Before we go any further, Katie, thanks for being the public. Appreciate you being here. And I'd like to introduce, I don't know if any folks met Anna Houston. Anna has applied to join us. And it's just pending now the vote of both the planning board and the board of selectmen, because you recall it's a joint appointment of the two boards, and then she'll be able to sit at the table with us. So,
Great.
and thanks very much
Welcome.
for stepping forward to do that.
Yeah.
Absolutely, I look forward to helping.
Awesome.
And Anna is very new to Littleton. You want to just tell us a little bit about yourself, please?
Certainly. So my husband and my daughter, who's 15 years old at Littleton High School, we arrived here on July 3rd from Denver, Colorado, and we are looking forward to many, many years here.
Awesome.
And I want to do some public math. That's just short of 4 months.
Yes.
Having arrived here in Littleton, and is jumping right into the deep end of the pool here. So thanks for wanting to be involved.
Well done.
Contributing. Okey-doke.
Can we pray in public for her?
Can we what?
Nothing.
Okay, you want to kick us off with the updates then on the two charrettes?
Sure.
Okay, you got it, Eric.
Yeah. I think this will be the bulk, or the largest item on the agenda, so, I know some of you were there at both of them, some of you were there at one of them, some of you were there at none of them.
Not to
So I think
mention
this will be a good overview.
Yep.
Try to keep it high level, hit the themes, to try to inform all of you and everybody watching at home. So just a little bit of overview of the purpose. So we held two charrettes. The first one was September 30th and October 1st, Friday night into Saturday morning. That one was on the focus area on Littleton Common, so that was really to kind of do a deeper dive, looking at the opportunities and the challenges with the Common, specifically around redevelopment, reconfiguration of the transportation network, and just trying to get people's opinion on what they think they'd like to see there over a longer period of time. The second one, which was October 14th and 15th, again, Friday night into Saturday morning, was a little bit different. We did a topic area discussion charrette, I guess for lack of a better term, and I'll talk a little bit more about that, but we covered transportation and facilities, open space and recreation, agriculture, and economic development. And so Friday night was a lot of discussion about the strengths, the weaknesses, the opportunities, and the threats in those different areas as they relate to the town and even to some degree the region. And then Saturday was really focused on developing more of a physical planning component that we could integrate right into the master plan for each of those areas. So just starting off the first one, just for everybody at home, this was the agenda. We started off with a lunch meeting with town staff that Maren and Keith organized, which was great because we've interacted with them, I think, in the very beginning of the process. And as questions have come up, we've contacted them individually, or maybe a couple of them. But this is a great time to sit around, had some pizza and some salad, and really talk about the Common, with the folks who are on the ground implementing a lot of the policies and regulations in town. So that was really good. 2:30, we did a walking tour with the public, and then we had the workshop in the evening, and then the workshop on Saturday. So I got some quick photos here. We had, so this is Peter Flinker, one of our sub-consultants, who was really, him and his team did an awesome job leading both of the charrettes. He's photographing the map on the top right. I was really shocked, 2:30 on a Friday, we had, 25, 30 people show up for the site walk. It was awesome. And Peter asked basically the people to lead the tour. We said, what are your concerns? Where are the opportunity areas? You help us walk around, you tell us. So it was really led by the people who were there, which was really cool. So of course, we looked at, all the intersections, the issues with walking and biking. We looked at some of the historical structures, like on Meeting House Road. We looked at some of the vacancies along the corridor, particularly as you're heading out of the Common on 119, headed out toward Acton. And we also looked at some of the newer development down across from Donnellan's on the north side of the street, around by the Acton Toyota, looking at the good and the bad there. So the walking tour was really great, perfect weather. So it's a good way to kind of kick it off. So then we took a short break so that we could have some time to set up at the middle school. And Peter gave just kind of a brief overview presentation of the Common. He showed a whole bunch of maps that sort of outlined some of the infrastructure that's there today, and also some of the natural features and some of the environmental challenges that exist in the Common. And then really what we spent the bulk of Friday night doing was really a group discussion about the strengths and the challenges of the Common and where some of the opportunities lie as we're looking into the future. And it was great. The Master Plan Steering Committee members facilitated all the table discussions, so the consultant team had a chance to float, which was great to kind of hear what everybody was talking about. We asked people to get creative, mark up maps, and what we wanted to do was to use that as a way to transition into Saturday morning. So we're talking about all the challenges, the issues, the opportunities in the evening portion, and then Saturday morning we're transitioning into how does that manifest itself on the ground in terms of the physical changes that need to happen in order to capitalize on those strengths, capitalize on those opportunities, and address some of those key challenges. So just to kind of go through what we heard, and this is generalized, it obviously doesn't capture everything. We have all the notes and we're in the process of compiling everything, but just generally the common themes from Friday night. So the strengths, people really loved the green space. I think, I don't know. In the very beginning, I thought of the Common as sort of that area, but then when we really talked to people, they said, well, we think of the Common as the green space itself, and then everything around it is sort of the area. So it's kind of interesting, but they love the green space. The sort of small business atmosphere that it has, and how it's very different from the Point, which is down the street. And they see those as two separate locations, but very different, I think, in character. The historical buildings and the churches. Later on, there's sort of a quote from someone who said that the area, as you're traveling through the Common, going south toward Town Hall on King Street, it's really kind of I think they call it the historical core of Littleton, which I thought was an interesting way of thinking about it. It's connected to nearby neighborhoods, which is great, nearby grocery options, and a lot of people, I think almost every group talked about the old mill building, what it is today, could it be repurposed, a lot of discussion about what's happening in Haverhill, in Lowell, in some of those locations. Different type of mill building, but potentially similar ideas. The weaknesses, probably no surprises here. Traffic, the issue that the roads are state-owned, so how do you work in partnership with MassDOT to figure out what kind of changes you can make there to make it more pedestrian-friendly, help with traffic circulation. A lot of people talked about parking, and both the perception, maybe the reality that there's a lack of parking, but also the parking that is there. I know there's a small lot kind of tucked off of, I think it's Stevens Street, that it's not really well signed, and people sort of said, well, it's a secret, don't tell anybody about it, we know about it, but we don't want anybody else to know, they'll get too busy, and they were joking, but so parking, the vacancies of some of the storefronts in the Common, a lot of discussion about the difficulty for pedestrians and cyclists to get around, sidewalk connectivity, crosswalks, things of that nature. I spent a lot of time looking at the Goldsmith, Adams, Stevens Street intersection and just sort of watching traffic navigate that intersection. It's sort of what you'd call, I guess it's sort of a four-way intersection or a five-way intersection, but just watching traffic go through there was fun.
Like coming out of Adams Street and going down, I mean, I guess.
Coming out of Goldsmith, sort of entering into or is that a one-way?
I'm trying to think where.
It's two-way.
Yeah, coming out of Goldsmith onto 2A
Yep.
is onto King Street
Yep,
is a
King
problem,
Street.
and then Adams Street is a separate
Exactly.
problem around the
Okay.
corner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So people would sort of come out of Goldsmith, stop midway across the intersection to either make a left on King or a right to go to the traffic light. So, but we didn't see any
art.
accidents or anything, so it's working. A lot of discussion about wastewater treatment in the very beginning, but I thought Peter did a nice job to try and say, we know that this is an issue, we don't want that to constrain your thinking. So why don't we think about what we want it to be like, and then we can figure out what are the options to actually make that happen. So I think that went a long way just to keep the discussion moving about what people would actually like the common to be. Building aesthetics, upkeep, and landscaping. So as I mentioned, it's a little cut off, but on day 2, so Saturday morning, we started bright and early, 9 a.m. I think we had about 50 or 60 people come both nights, Friday night and Saturday. So as I mentioned, we're taking everything from Friday night and we're trying to figure out how does that manifest itself in a physical plan for the common. So Peter and his team created these giant 7-foot base maps and had all these styrofoam blocks. You'll see in some of the images, the tan buildings are existing buildings that are there today, and then the white-colored buildings are ones that Peter and his team created that people could then use to represent new development or new buildings or new opportunities. So Peter started the morning off with a great presentation about some case studies from similar towns of somewhat similar size with he picked out actually a couple of interesting examples that had state roads crossing through or in and around their downtown areas. A lot of the places that he and his company and his team have worked in. So I think that helped people think about the strategies that could then be employed in Littleton to address some of the issues. And just as a quick plug, today I just put all those presentations on the website, so if anybody hasn't seen them, they're up there now. We went through the modeling exercise, and then at the end we had a representative from each group. We took sort of photos from above, put them up on the projection screen, and then asked people to share their group's discussion at the end of the day. So just some of the common themes that a lot of the groups, I try to consolidate this into some things that were common across more than one team. The idea of closing Meeting House Road and expanding the common green space across that was something that came up quite a bit. Closing Stevens Street to traffic and either allowing parking to happen there, making it kind of a pedestrian way, or just completely closing it off and expanding the common green space and having businesses front along there, trying to put parking in the back so you still accommodate parking for businesses. Lots and lots of ideas about improving sidewalks, crosswalks, bike facilities, and bike parking in the common. I'd say that was probably a common theme across every team. Redeveloping the building that currently houses the vinyl shop and the Oriental supermarket, so bringing that building up to the street. Right now it sits in the back with parking in front. So a lot of people talked about over time, if something happens there, could you encourage the property owner or developer to bring that building up to the front?
In order to put parking in the back, or, okay.
Yeah, so you'd have parking wrap around the back. So it'd have the same, it would kind of match the street frontage of the building that has the pub, so it'd be kind of a continuous building wall there. A lot of discussion about the rehab of the old mill building. Some folks who have been in it or have space in it talked about the issues with handicap accessibility. So if that is redeveloped or improved over time, is that something that could be thought about and improved upon? Liner buildings in front of Donnellan. So right now it's just that center, that commercial center, set far back from the street with large parking area in front. Is there ways to infill buildings along Great Road in the front, so you still have parking in the middle between sort of infill buildings in the front and Donnellan's to the back?
Like businesses and things like that?
Yep, businesses, yep. New development, a lot of people talked about mixed use, pretty popular. New development should have some housing over ground floor commercial space, could be retail, restaurants, office space, but some type of commercial space. But concerns about density, so I think something in the probably 2 to 3 story range seemed to be what most people were talking about. The desire for more restaurants, small shops, and businesses. I'll show you some photos of the maps that people worked on, but this idea was pretty common throughout a lot of teams, was sort of a rear access road behind the buildings on the south side of Great Road. So behind Donnellan's and behind those buildings, could you have access that would then access almost like a shared parking facility back there. Some groups talked about it as being for vehicular traffic. Some groups thought about it as kind of part of a shopping trail that would connect some of the nearby neighborhoods to those areas. So maybe it's only for bikes and peds, maybe it accommodates vehicles. And then redeveloping the block from Robinson Road to the east to basically where the DCU building is now. Bringing those buildings up to the front, parking in the rear, and then maybe looking at a shared parking scheme.
Stop there, please.
Sure.
Peter, that was a very common theme as far as what to do along the road there, where DCU is now, and the purchase by Northern Bank of the properties along there.
DCU?
Well drawn out. You know, the old DCU building is, and now Northern Bank purchasing the property to the old florist shop and looking to develop it. So if that's something the planning board could pay particular attention to as we go through this, as you guys think it through a bit.
There's a new owner of the DCU, the old DCU building next to Banks's.
Yeah.
That's
What the one I'm talking about is what Northern Bank has purchased
going
towards
down the other way, towards the
Common.
center, yes.
Yeah. And what they're looking to do.
All right.
Thank you. All right.
Okay, I'll just show you some example images. So I picked a couple of images that focus on the kind of King Street, Great Road, Goldsmith area, the kind of core of the Common, just to show you what some people were talking about. So you'll see on the left-hand side of King Street, the idea of sort of redevelopment of that, the vinyl shop building and the supermarket. And then you'll see where King Street and Stevens Road, Great Road and Goldsmith all come together there. You'll notice a common theme across, I think I have 3 images here of different ideas about closing that off and what that could become. You'll see that, as I mentioned, the white buildings are new development opportunities or new buildings that people were playing around with. Here's an image from another team. So in this case, keeping Stevens open, but not allowing parking, but still having new buildings fronting that street. There was some discussion about a parking garage and where that's feasible, where that might be located, and most of the groups who talked about that had it situated on the east side of King Street, either behind any new development that might happen at the supermarket site or the vinyl shop site, or even tucked behind, almost between the lumber yard and the mill building, back in that direction. I think that was some ideas about how to address the parking if redevelopment in the Common were to take place. And then again, you can see a lot of common themes about what to do in this area and redevelopment opportunities. And the other area that I picked was just looking, this is looking down toward Acton along Great Road, basically from Robinson Road down to Donnellan's and the Toyota. So you can see on the right-hand side of the image, there's the black mark there. That's sort of that loop road behind all the development that fronts along Great Road. That was kind of the idea there. So it would still provide access to those parking lots in the rear.
That would be cool. I grew up, well, part of my life I grew up on this street, another part down by the lake, but man, yeah, we create our own little burrows to get down there.
I'll bet.
Yeah.
Cutting through people's yards.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
I mean, no.
Don't do that.
And then you could see the block we were talking about from Robinson Road down to the DCU, where on the left-hand side, the north side of Great Road. This is just another image from another team. So similar themes. Again, a little bit bigger buildings on that block and across the street, but similar ideas. So that was our brief recap.
So what happens with those huge maps and houses?
So everything is documented with photographs from each team, so we have a digital record of that. I think the plan still is to bring, Peter had his team glue down a bunch of them, I think 2 or 3 of them, as sort of example models. I think the plan is to bring those to the next big public meeting in
Cool.
December.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I hope we kept some of that.
Yeah.
Maybe something we'd even want to have hanging around here for something, I don't know what. So don't just throw them away.
No,
basically.
he has them, yeah.
Cool, cool.
Yeah.
You know, that you both say that, you know, maybe the library might be a place.
All right.
Is that something we could look at, please, Mara?
The new library. In the presentation, were the participants provided with the number of discrete owners of the various properties that comprise, shall we say, the survey area.
No, we didn't get that far into the detail.
So this development notion was free of,
Right.
okay.
Yep.
I'd offer it was unconstrained as best that could make it possible.
Exactly, yeah. So then I guess the thought process there is that the consultant team will look at these common themes and the ideas that people came up with and try to use that as a way to help to inform the strategies that we'd like to present, to the committee and to the public further down the process.
Yeah, I'd offer what emerged was folks would like to hide parking behind buildings, move buildings to the street, in essence, with possible some balconies thrown in there, along with sidewalks, and then maybe some angle parking in front of some of these buildings, with architecturally appropriate, if you will, storefronts. Does that capture,
Yeah.
I think, in a nutshell, that's what I took out of the common charrette. I don't know, other folks, your thoughts?
Yeah, my take on it was that to make the common feel like a center, we had to make it be urban rather than rural, and that meant bringing the buildings up to the sidewalk, because that's really the way cities are, is buildings go right to the sidewalk, and that was the goal in that small area, and the parking was a necessity that had to go somewhere, so it ended up in back. I mean, I think everybody wanted to get rid of cars, or, in an ideal world, we wouldn't have them, but they have to be somewhere. So it was the idea of urbanizing a small part of the whole town that we talked about and wanted to implement. And that was very clearly Peter's, the way he led us into the exercise by talking about the different examples was, this is what a successful urban center looks like, or village center, and this is not. So it was bringing the buildings up to the street and sidewalk.
Anybody else?
Very good.
Thanks.
Great. Okay, so charrette number 2. So a little bit different in terms of the format. We didn't do any site walk or anything beforehand. So we started the evening, 6:30 on Friday with a workshop, and then following up again, same time, 9 a.m. on Saturday, with breaking into groups and really kind of delving into each of the topic areas, developing what we're calling sort of the more physical manifestations of the discussions on Friday. So we approach this by doing what we call a SWOT analysis, so looking at the strengths, the weaknesses, the opportunities, and the threats in partnership with the public around the goals that related to the 4 topic areas that we wanted to cover. So we presented the goals. Actually, on Friday night, we started by presenting some of the initial existing conditions information, some really high-level information from the inventory, just to set the stage so people kind of knew where's Littleton today, to help sort of inform that SWOT analysis discussion. And then we took the goals and we asked people, within Littleton, what are the strengths? What are the weaknesses related to open space and agriculture? What are the opportunities moving forward into the future with transportation? What are the threats to economic development in the town? We really wanted people to kind of hammer in on these and dive in and tell us what they thought. So the way we organized it was we had 4 discussion tables, one for each topic, and we asked people to break up, sit down. I think we had about 40 people or so, I think, that night, so in groups of 8 or 10, and we gave each group 20 minutes, and we rotated just around in a circle, so everybody had a chance, each group had a chance to talk about all 4 topic areas, and then we jotted all that down on big pieces of paper, brought that back the next day. So I'm going to just kind of go through what some of those strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats were for each of the areas, just so that you all have an opportunity to see what people talked about. Again, this is general, doesn't cover everything, but a lot of the kind of hot topics. Strengths, this is agriculture. On the strengths, the right to farm bylaw, open space committee. I won't read all these. You can sort of look at them as I'm going through. People in town are really interested in farms and interested in farming. The farmland sort of creates the identity of the town, which I thought was interesting. People really hold that close. A lot of the discussion, that first public meeting around rural characteristics or rural character, I think this kind of goes lock and step with that. On the weaknesses, probably, again, not surprising, the high cost of land when it comes to purchasing and preservation. This issue of some of the farmers who are older and are passing away and don't necessarily have plans for succession. What does that mean for some of these farms? What does that mean for the town? In some cases, it may mean that there's a subdivision plan on the table, and if there's no plan, it's either that or try and purchase the land if the town can do it. There doesn't seem to be a lot in the middle at this point in time. A lot of development pressure in the town, so developers are coming in. Development right now is profitable. The developers are well organized and very active in Littleton, was what people were telling us. Farms are privately held, most are not currently protected. Not enough money in the town's coffers when the land comes up for sale. And then resistance to action by the public and the farmers has made it hard to be proactive and to kind of think proactively. So I hope as we go through the master plan, we can help to address some of that. Opportunities, promoting sort of a local, a farm movement, eating local movement. A lot of discussion about improving the cluster zoning, potentially changing that, maybe allowing higher density, trying to figure out how that could work better, maybe from a financial perspective for the property owners to try and entice them to take advantage of that. Being proactive and flexible with farmers, being open to new ideas that they might have, that you might have, educating the public and trying to build on the local pride in farms. And a lot of people talked about marketing through the Littleton Grows website, trying to improve some of that. On the threats, as I mentioned before, older farmers are passing away, no plans for succession, development pressures in town, probably likely to continue. Town continues to be an attractive location for not only developers, but for new residents and businesses in town. The schools are great, the amenities are great, people want to be here. Cost of living or the price of housing is high, but it's less than a lot of the surrounding communities, so it's attracting that development. And then this idea of competing interests for town funding, while open space and farmland preservation I think is important to people, there's a lot of other competing interests as well, and a lot of other things that the town needs to weigh as to what they're going to pay for on a yearly basis and going forward. So what Peter did, Peter had this group on Saturday, and I'm going to do my best. I wasn't able to make it on Saturday, so I'm going to do my best to give his synopsis of it. But he wanted to engage people in a discussion about creating an agriculture and sort of a food systems plan. So, you know, what do you do with the farms that are there today? Are there ways to think about regional cooperation when it comes to agriculture and farming? Could Littleton sort of be a regional hub for processing, or for farmers to come and utilize a shared kitchen or a processing facility? So what he discussed with his group is and this was a mapping exercise, what land is in need of future protection? So that was one of the questions that he had asked. What land was recently lost to development, and is there a balanced approach that maybe could have been taken in some of the cases where farmland had been lost to development? And then identifying town-owned land that could potentially be put back into agricultural production. So those are some of his initial questions to the group. And then some of the ways that they were thinking about improving the viability of existing farms or maybe new farms in the future in Littleton. Enhancing marketing and the sales of goods through maybe a larger farmer's market or some kind of a shared food stand or a food co-op, maybe near the Common, the Point, or some other central location that's easy to get to. This idea about processing, sales, and consumption, maybe thinking about it more regionally. Does that make sense to bring in goods and farmers and engage them from surrounding towns as well? A lot of discussion in this group and in the economic development group about the Very Fine facility as maybe serving that purpose. Might not be the whole facility, but it could be potentially be a piece of it. And then discussion about refining the cluster bylaw to provide greater incentives for the protection of the farmland and the open space in town. And then Peter has accompanying maps for all this that people annotated, basically answering those first three questions and then delving into the discussion below. Open space and recreation. Peter's coworker Nate had this group. From what I hear, this group on Saturday didn't want to move. They wanted to spend the entire 2 hours talking, but we broke up Saturday into an hour chunk. So you got to spend an hour with one table and then an hour with another table. So you had to pick two. But apparently this group, I wasn't there, but this group didn't want to move, which I think speaks to the you know, how much people care about open space and recreation in the town. its popularity as a topic. So Friday night, these were some of the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats that came out. History of purchasing land for open space, people found that as a strength. The different types of recreational amenities in town, people really like. The programming, people felt that the programming was strong. The events that happen in town are really great. And then the idea of capitalizing on the Native American history, the kind of cultural landscape component of the discussion, I thought was really interesting. Something I personally hadn't heard yet. On the weaknesses, so declining farming, farm workforce, the conditions and the maintenance on the playing fields. I know this has come up in a number of times so far. And then just the issues around capacity of some of the current recreation fields in the indoor recreation space. So some of the opportunities, people talked about new locations for playing fields and ball fields. So Morgan property, Gary's Farm, and maybe a possible expansion. Some of the existing sites came up. Bridging transportation, this idea about an open space trail connecting Long Lake area to the Common, creating almost, people called it a shopping trail. This came up a couple times in this charrette and in the first one. And then the idea of maybe promoting recreational opportunities to families and youth even more than what's already done. And then also expand this idea of sort of a tourism campaign, talking about Littleton as a place where people from outside Littleton may want to come to take advantage of the things that are here. Threats, currently unprotected open spaces, development pressures, safety of people getting around, and then the growing population creating new demands for future facilities and space. So the idea on Saturday was to sort of create an open space and recreation plan. So the groups created a natural resource priority map, which was one exercise, and then a cultural resources priority map, which was the other. And what they did was they identified key locations in town. I think they used markers and they used dots to identify water resources, critical habitats, open spaces, farms, and then they looked at where those were located and where they had clusters. Then they talked about, is this a corridor? Is this a node that should be that the town should focus on in terms of protecting these resources that are there? And then looking at ways to connect those areas together through connected corridors. And with the hopes that that would then help to inform this sort of larger open space and recreation plan. They also did something similar for the cultural resources in town and looking at the Native American cultural and archaeological sites around town. And this interesting idea that came up a couple times of the Route 119 corridor being really valued for sort of the landscape that exists there and what the town's been able to establish there. And then as I mentioned before, King Street, sort of south of the Common as a historic core, does it make sense to try and establish some kind of a historic district to protect what's there in the face of any future change? On economic development, I'll go through these a little quicker. Friday night, strengths again, utility rates on water and power, the existing building stock that's currently vacant is a strength and offers opportunity. The commuter rail station and access to the regional highway system. Weaknesses, the lack of wastewater treatment really does restrict the town in certain locations to what can be done. The sort of last mile connections from the train station to businesses, traffic. So opportunities, the mill building in the Common, opportunity for sort of a flexible space. This came up in transportation and economic development, thinking about the Crosstown Connect transit system as a way to then make connections around town, fill that last mile connection between the commuter rail stations and businesses. Thinking about zoning that's tailored specifically to different commercial areas in Littleton. So if those areas are going to function differently, should the kind of business districts or commercial districts be tailored to those different areas? The threats, a lot of discussion about traffic congestion. The town's currently bisected by a number of state routes and interstates. What happens if IBM leaves as a threat for the future? Doesn't look like it's likely, but that's a very large taxpayer, very large piece of property. What happens if that happens in 15 or 20 years? So then what we asked people to do was to look at 3 areas on Saturday to talk about concept plans. That included the Common, the area around Taylor Street and Foster Street, the old digital buildings, and then Route 2A and Harvard Road, kind of the very fine area out to the industrial park. For the Common, I think we've covered most of this with charrette number 1, so I won't go into that. Taylor and Foster Street, Some of the issues, lack of parking, the commuter rail lot is often full, but there's a desire to sort of integrate that in with any new development, so trying to capitalize on the commuter rail access. People discussed thinking about innovative educational uses down there, trying to maybe think about a mixed-use opportunity, integrating housing, maybe condos and single family, some combination of that to kind of create a second center in town aside from the common, and then maybe incorporating neighborhood serving retail down there. It's a little bit, sort of acting a little bit different than it does today. And then the area around Route 2, discussion about an indoor recreation center or rock climbing gym. This is sort of related to the repurposing of the Very Fine site. A brewery at the Very Fine site, given that it was a bottling plant. Ideas about reopening the former train station depot. Think about something that will attract younger people and families to the area. That area abuts conservation land, so thinking about that as a sort of a leverage point to get people downtown. Once they're down there, then what do they do? Are there restaurants, retail, bike path, recreation, playgrounds, etc. Okay, last one. Transportation, strengths again, commuter rail station, highway access, the Council on Aging Transportation and Crosstown Connect, kind of the partnership that the town has there. The adoption of the Complete Streets program and policy was seen as a big positive. The town's, somebody said the town's being very proactive as they're thinking about transportation now, whereas in the past maybe that wasn't as much. Thinking about how everybody gets around town, not necessarily just vehicles. People had good things to say about the maintenance of the sidewalks that exist today. So what sidewalks are there today? People felt the maintenance was good and they're in good condition. They appreciate the work that the town's doing. Weaknesses, traffic, parking. Council on Aging vans are currently at capacity, and we see from the data that the senior population is expected to grow quite a bit over the next 20 years. So that's all, the demand on that is only going to grow. The need for more sidewalks, crosswalks, bike facilities, and bike parking, I think dominated the conversation with many groups. Truck traffic is an issue coming off 495, particularly on the south side of town, and the need to improve the existing off-street trail network. A lot of people talked about that. Opportunities, continuing this idea of Crosstown Connect, creating the town-wide shuttle, connecting trails through open spaces, again, creating that shopping trail, utilizing the Complete Streets funding or the grant program that's available from the state. Threats was interesting. A lot of people talked about, traffic's growing in Littleton, and Littleton has been developing more and more over time. But it's not just Littleton where that's occurring, and since there are a lot of major roads that go through Littleton, both north and south and east and west, the traffic isn't just a Littleton sort of challenge, it's more regional, and as other towns grow, that's, as people cut through Littleton, that's going to continue to be an issue. Obviously, the lack of funding for transportation is an issue. I thought interesting too, the perception that sidewalks and bike facilities may be seen by some as a luxury, not necessarily a necessity, that people might have that perception. Could be a hurdle in town to see investment happen with those transportation infrastructure projects. So we asked people to develop a townwide transportation plan on Saturday. So this is just a map with a ton of detail on it. People really got into this. They were really looking at how, we asked people to think about where do you actually want to connect to? Where does the transportation network not connect to now, depending on how you're traveling around? Where would you want to go, and then how would you do that? So people talked about doing that through biking, walking, transit connections, and then some of the locations where traffic and or safety, vehicular safety are issues. That's it.
And you said those presentations were posted out there?
Yep, so if you go to planlittleton.org and go under the public participation tab, they should be up there.
Questions of Eric?
Yep, got it.
Marla? Mike?
Could you show this, the very last slide, one more time? Okay, thanks.
Sure. Peter?
That was
very
very
good.
exciting, yeah.
All right. Katie representing the public. Anna?
I thought that the process was terrific in terms of engagement and also the level of detail to which people were really putting their thoughts down.
Right, as we move forward in this whole process, as huge folks think, when it comes to the implementation, you know, we've been talking about building implementation throughout, and not just as a chapter at the end, and this is how we implement. Because there's a lot of things in there. Mike asked a pretty good question there about the number of owners. And it's, you know, yeah, we're a small town, so in the aggregate, it's a small number of owners. The thing is, it's individual owners of small parcels of land, and there's some of the larger property owners too. But all need to be worked with in some way, shape, or form. So when you folks are thinking about the implementation piece of this, think about how you help us with process and techniques so that we can work towards solutions. You know, techniques that have worked elsewhere and how to build consensus with disparate property owners. You know, people, absentee landlords, corporations, the small individual who has a small business, and maybe that small business is just leasing. Because certainly everything we were looking at, for the most part, deals with private property. And while we all had some good ideas how we'd like to see someone else's private property developed,
Yep.
we have to, you know, keep that in mind. So it definitely has to be very collaborative. If it comes across as that you got, you know, a small number of folks in town saying, this is how we build Littleton, we may doom ourselves to failure. So be crafty there, and I'm using the word crafty in a very good sense, on how, as a craftsman, that you put this together for us. All right. I know you're going to do that, but it's important enough to emphasize in that we, as a steering committee, somewhat have, not the same idea, but that we arrive at a consensus too, as to help you with that direction, as to what we're learning from folks in town. And at that, how we go out and reach even more folks. Because certainly there's been a lot of good participation up to this point, but at the most, it's probably 300 people that have participated, at least, whether it's the public forum, the charrettes, one or the other. So I'd say it's been no more than about 300 total people. Now, you've reached out and touched others in different ways, but as far as direct participation, that's still a very small number. It's a good number, and I'm happy with it. Nevertheless, if we want it to be larger, and you need to help us there, please. Let me stop there then. And do you want to go on? Anybody else want to add anything at this point? Anna?
So one of the comments that was brought up earlier was the work that is being done regionally. The whole model of regional collaboration is actually one that various areas around the country have used, mainly in terms of larger cities. But I think regional collaboration could be utilized here as well in terms of being able to work with all of the other surrounding towns to be able to come together. So when you're looking at how to have those conversations, what would those conversations look like as well?
Yeah, that's a great point. I think Littleton is literally I feel like a broken record by saying this every time, but it's a national model for regional collaboration from a transportation standpoint
Right.
with the Crosstown Connect. It's the first of its kind, and hopefully it'll be replicated elsewhere. But yeah, I agree with you. I
Well,
think
and replicating that in all of the other sectors
exactly.
as well.
Yeah, it's a great point.
Actually, I have a question. Part of this, you touched on it a couple of times, the transportation and the highways are run by the state. Is there a way to deal with the DOT to keep them from, bulldozing a 4-lane highway through the common? I mean, because the traffic from Groton and, there is that kind of pressure, and I don't want to see, the middle of town made into a 8 lanes each way intersection with, left and right turns and all that stuff.
Yeah. My hope is, given all the strides that have been made at MassDOT around complete streets and not bulldozing large roads through the middle of town, hopefully that won't happen. But I think having a collaborative relationship with the district will help, will go a long way, and I'm sure you guys do.
We do. We've been making a lot of good progress there. Not to say that things can't change over time, but a good example is the new light that's coming in at Willow Road there, going down to Air. That was really, they partnered with us. They listened to us. They, made good on their word. So I'm feeling pretty good about that right now, that they wouldn't just, they'd talk to us and tell us what they're trying to do, but, you never know, I guess.
Yeah, I can agree with Melissa on that. That's a part of a maturation process that I would say began in the center of town, actually, with good striping.
Yep.
The markings, because you remember, it was pretty hazardous before. It's really not the safest intersection on the planet, but it's a lot better now with the markings, the turn signals, left turns on the light signal instead of just Vegas freestyle.
Right.
Very helpful. And
Oh, yeah.
that process, I would say, and you talk about regional, it's just two towns, but Air, Board of Selectmen, and the Littleton Board of Selectmen to get together on the intersection that's now is signaled, and it's due for a complete reconstruction inside of 5 years. And they say 5 years, what helps that do is for us now? But I want to take that opportunity to use it as a segue. We did mention to folks, remember, none of what we're talking about at those charrettes is instant fix.
Right.
And it's incremental, it's over time, and we're talking about 2030, and since we're about to hit 2017, we're looking at a 13-year plan of sorts, when you really get down to it. So it's easy to get frustrated, because things aren't happening right this moment, but I think we see a lot of good indicators, and this is bringing it out too, with more ideas on how to work with those indicators that exist and make them even better, so.
Yeah.
Okay. You want to, Amanda?
Sorry, actually, one more thing that reminded me of, one gentleman at the Saturday charrette mentioned, I'll use the term low-hanging fruit. He said, so much of this will take a lot of time, take a lot of money, but what can be done on a short-term basis or on a more quick basis for not a lot of money, if we just think about it differently. So I don't know if perhaps some of those items can be separated out to say this is the low-hanging fruit that can be gained in the next, say, 1 to 3 years, as opposed to a longer-term vision.
I think we have done that in a number of master plans where we identify things that can be done in the short term versus things that are going to take longer. And I'd imagine in our implementation chapter, we'll do the same for Littleton, yeah.
Unfortunately, I couldn't be around. I want to get some idea, if you can, what was the level of enthusiasm or interest in Foster and Taylor being a site of, I'll say, redevelopment? Was it sort of like an aside, or was it sort of,
Good question.
was it?
I wish I could tell you, but I wasn't there on
Okay,
Saturday.
does anyone have an idea of, yeah,
There wasn't as much excitement as I would expect to see, honestly. But, there was some acknowledgement that that might work as a spot for.
and the other question is, are there any state roads, highways, proximal to Taylor and Foster the way they are in the current common? No. Okay. I was thinking of, MassDOT is known to do trade-offs. If they can, shall we say, make the 495 access to King Street and more I'll give you an example of some of the discussions.
Yeah.
I've just moved other towns into Littleton. We do a trade-off where, in return for allowing the old common to turn into what it really is, which is an access road to many towns around it, is that the town center, near transportation, that's accessible just about everything, can get remodeled. The state DOT and the state may be more willing to do a trade-off. They can facilitate better transportation at 495 in return for funding the redevelopment of, I'll say, the old railroad station and its proximate to the. So that's why I was asking if there was any interest, because you have a freer hand and economics actually are more positive. And the evidence is, name the number of folks who've stepped up, Maren, to the planning board in the last several years and said, I want to do development in your common.
I don't think you meant it as a rhetorical question. May
No,
have come across
I
as one.
Yep.
Haven't been there. The closer things went to the common, because even in the second charrette, the greater the interest. So if you will, so
Yep.
as we moved away from the common, the interest, I don't want to say waned, it just wasn't as strong as goes to the comment. And the second one was more thematic than location-specific. So I'd be cautious to say, well, there wasn't as much enthusiasm perhaps out there. When you look at economic redevelopment, I think you're looking more at Foster and Taylor as falling into that. And then when you're looking at farming, I mean, certainly Great Road
Yeah.
is an example.
Yeah.
Look at
I also wonder if that area is harder for people to kind of wrap their heads around in terms of what could that area be, whereas in the common, people are, I think, very familiar with it, they go there all the time, and then down in the, where Very Fine is, I think people are familiar that that's a big facility down there that's currently vacant, and that's an opportunity, so it gives you like something tangible to think
Plus
about.
the operation that was
Yeah,
iconic to the
I mean, I'm
town,
just,
so.
it's about my own opinion, but.
Existing conditions sections update, let's jump into that.
Okay. So right now, the document's out in draft form. It's up, Maren,
Describe what the document is first, please.
sure, thank you. The document is it's each of the different master plan elements, and it's the existing conditions, so sort of where the town is today in relation to each of the 9 master plan elements, which include things like land use and transportation, open space, recreation, et cetera. So it's a compilation of all those different chapters into one document, so people can get a good snapshot of where the town, was maybe 5, 10 years ago, up to where it is today. And in some cases, where it might be headed, based on projections if they exist in certain sections.
It's important to note, and we've made this disclaimer as part of the document, is that it's existing conditions. So if somebody were to read it and say, well, this master plan, it changes nothing. Well, it's not the master plan. It's a piece of our process that describes where we sit in Littleton, roughly through almost the beginning of October. You guys, it's a fairly current document as far as what the existing conditions are. So I was very pleased to see that level of currency that you noted in it. But that's what I want to drive home to folks that are watching this on television, that are going to read it and go through it. So when they offer their comments to us, that's in their minds.
Yeah, it's a great point.
So now describe access to it and what we're asking folks to do, please.
Sure. So anyone who has been a part of our public engagement process to date should have received an email from me with links to the document. The document's also available on the website, planlittleton.org, under, I think it's called Data and Documents tab. It's the second tab. So you can go there and you can download it. You can download the PDF document itself, also the accompanying maps. They were a little bit too big to put in the document, so we created 2 separate files for the maps. And then finally, maybe even most importantly, if you want to comment, and the comment is open to anybody, there's a comment matrix. It's a Word document that you can download. There's a cover page that tells you how to use the comment matrix. It's a fairly simple table that just asks you to write down what your comment is, what page and paragraph it's located on, and then we ask you to then submit any comments that you have using that matrix to Maren at masterplan@littletonma.org. And that comment period is open until November 8th.
And it's not what we'll discard, anything comes in after the 8th. The reason for the 8th, it gives us an opportunity to go through the comments also and to begin organize it and helping the consultants now with that information so they can begin processing it, or continue processing, as a better term, and provide us more documents and more findings as we go through this. So again, we won't discard anything that comes in after the 8th, but certainly work towards that suspense, and it helps all of us as a town to make a better product here. Now, Maren, how many people are on the town distribution email?
It was 1,100.
Okay, so between the emails Eric sent out and some of the others that personally we've sent out, that we've put on Facebook pages, both our personal pages, the Master Plan Update Steering Committee, Residents for a Better Littleton, plus those 1,100, certainly there's going to be duplicates there, but I dare say we've reached out to at least over 1,500 households in the town of Littleton with this particular piece of information. Our folks were extolling it, please, and I'll even go so far as to beg you, if you want me to get on my knees and beg you, I certainly am plenty happy to do that. But very sincerely, go through it, read through the document. It's roughly 90 pages, but it's double-spaced. There's graphs in there, so it's not all that much reading. And on a long flight across the United States in the middle of the night, you can get the reading done, I found out. So, pleased to that. And you don't need to take that long flight at night.
3/4 of an inch thick.
There are 2 hard copies in the library, 2 hard copies in the Council on Aging.
Okay? So,
And our target to have it read is for the 15th, well, I'll get it for the comments, I guess, but we don't have to have it before that. We're not going to discuss it as a team, like on, never mind, that's our next meeting. We're good, I'm good, we're good.
yeah. So please get those comments into us by the 8th. And we've asked for your identification information on there too, and if you choose not to do it, it's your call. But you may raise a particular point that it's worthwhile for us to come back to you and say, can you expand upon this a little bit? And if there's something we thought there's a misunderstanding, we'd like to clear that up immediately also. So keep that in mind. And then, as Melissa was leading into, we do meet on the 15th, and that'll give us a week at the least to, pour through the data, and certainly not have done a thorough analysis of it at that point. But we'll be able to speak somewhat intelligently, hopefully more intelligent than we usually do, I don't know, come the 15th anyway. All right, anything else? I haven't read it. Do you guys want to offer any comment at this point?
I got through part of the first section, I'll say that. I'm so close to being done with the first section. I thought it was really cool. I mean, some stuff because you know it in your gut, but some of the, statistics and analysis, back to analytics that was done was very interesting. So I was intrigued to keep reading. Ran out of time, but.
There's only one thing I want to bring up publicly, and it deals with the churches. You mentioned 4 churches. You did not mention the Church of Latter-day Saints. Those are important cultural, religious things, and I don't want anybody to feel left out. We're going to miss things, I get that, but that was an important one as I went through that. So. And I did mention Residents for a Better Littleton. If folks don't know, that page exists on Facebook. Check it out, and it's as simple as that. So when you go on Facebook, search, and it's Residents for a Better Littleton. Then we have the Master Plan Update Steering Committee page, and then certainly people's personal pages. We mentioned which one did I miss?
The one down by Newtown, just before getting to Acton, the
Chinese Bible Church?
Yeah. Thank you. You're absolutely right.
I knew that. So did you.
I drive by it often enough, so I should have remembered. Okay. Do we have any other comments on the existing conditions, folks? Anna?
One comment related to making sure that people understand the intent and the purpose of the document. I was just wondering whether having something in the footer that can easily be done so that everybody can see that it says this is a document intended to provide a picture of the current state. This is not the master plan. Because as I started to read through it, my mind was immediately going to, oh, but what about this one? And then I kept thinking, okay, no, it's not the master plan. So I'm just wondering if something like that
Put
might
that on the
be
webpage, because I made that comment too to make sure.
Yeah, I think it's at the very beginning of the
In the
master
beginning,
plan.
yeah. Yeah.
But then as you're actually reading through it, I'm wondering if it might be helpful to see it again.
Katie?
Yeah,
Hi.
hi.
Have you had an opportunity to look at it yet?
I did, I read through it, I mean, not thoroughly, I sort of skimmed it, I want to go back and spend more time.
You've been in town a little while now. Do you somewhat feel it captured the essence at the very least?
From what I saw, yeah.
Okay, super. All right. Okay, December public forum. So we want to set a date for it, and remind us of our options, please.
Do you want me to do that? Preferably the 7th of December. The other option is the 6th.
All right, and we've had no violent reaction as far as the 7th not working for us, right?
Yeah.
Anybody here at the table?
When is it? Oh, December 7th.
All right, as an administrative date setting, I think we can go with the 7th. Everybody concur on that? All right. You should be sworn in by then. So let's go with the 7th.
Perfect.
We're going to do it middle school?
That's what it says.
Okay,
Middle school is
Yeah,
available.
this is just a tentative, I
Okay.
had just done this mock-up, because Mara and I were going back and forth on the design and the details, but
what have you heard so far from the schools?
The middle school is available. There will be a volleyball game in the gym late in the evening. That's the only other activity going
Right.
on.
So it looks like we're firming up the Littleton Middle School, 55 Russell Street, 7 December, dinner at 6 PM. And folks who went to the first public forum, may recall the gala festival we had, and it was a culinary delight that evening. And we're in store for the same again. So please come out for dinner, begin that conversation with friends, relatives, residents, people you haven't met. You have the opportunity to meet new folks here in town. And then the discussion will begin in earnest at 7 PM that evening, and it'll run through 9 PM. Okay? You want to give us just a little bit of what you believe the content and format is going to be?
sure. So we definitely want to take probably about a half an hour. The details are still being worked out as to when that might happen. We're thinking about maybe taking the 6:30 to 7 portion of dinner. As people have gotten their dinner, they're sitting down, they're eating, they're talking. We might do a brief presentation then to introduce and discuss the existing conditions document. So we'll have that opportunity to do that with the public. And then from 7 to 9 would be the sort of meat of the meeting, where we'd really, the idea right now, tentatively, is to have a station, figuring out how to locate this and do this, but the idea, bear with me, is to have stations for each of the master plan elements, so one for transportation, one for land use, et cetera. We would have the goals that the committee, the draft goals that the committee had approved a few months ago. The goal that either the goal or goals that relate to that element of the master plan at each station. And we're hoping to have a discussion with folks about what would success look like in Littleton if the stated goal were to be achieved. So for transportation, for example, if the goal, I don't remember the exact wording, but to create a safe and a safe transportation system that works for all modes. Well, that's a very lofty goal, and to translate that goal down into implementable strategies, our discussion as a team was that there's a very large gap. We're not sure we fully understand what residents and business owners and property owners in Littleton think about those goals, number one, and then how would they measure whether or not in 10 or 15, 20 years that goal has been met and this plan is considered successful. So we'd like to have a conversation with people about that. If this is the goal, and if you disagree or want to add to it or change it, please let us know, so we'll have that opportunity, which we haven't had yet with the public. Then if we agree on that as a premise, the goal generally, then what does success look like and what does implementation look like in Littleton? And then how would you measure that? And what we're hoping is if we can ask people that question, they can tell us, well, you know, it would be great, success would look like 40% of them, making it up, but 40% of the roads or 50% of the roads have sidewalks on at least one side of Littleton. Okay, we know the goal, we know what success looks like. The bridge that we feel in between is the implementation strategy. How do we get from that goal to that success point? So that would be the part that we would then come away with, and we would then work on in the next portion of the master plan, that implementation and those strategies, which we would then come back to the public and to you obviously too, at the final meeting to say, these are the strategies. Now, we're sort of debating internally back and forth whether we introduce some strategies based on what we've heard from all the outreach that we've done and our discussions with you and the existing conditions research that we've done. I don't think we've really made a decision yet on what to do about that, but generally we're hoping to have this sort of goal-based discussion and this idea of what does success look like in Littleton.
Is the typical step that you take in your public participation event list, if you will?
I would say that a discussion of goals and strategies is a natural next step. I haven't been at this as long as Daphne and Judy have, but for me, I thought this was a really interesting and maybe more unique way of going about it, and a way to try and have a more detailed conversation with people in Littleton about number one, does this goal make sense, which is typically part of the conversation, but then, you know, if this goal were to be realized, what does it look like in Littleton? Because what it looks like in Littleton is probably very different than what it looks like in Westford or Acton or, you know, Boston or wherever else, pick a community. So we want to try to make sure that the implementation steps and strategies that we're going to lay out reflect what people want to see happen in Littleton, so.
I think it makes a lot of good sense. I totally agree with where your head's at. I'm just thinking of all the events we've had so far. It's just, off the top of my head, it's probably the least sexy one, if you will, you know, like, yeah, I want to help them figure out, you know what I mean? So let's get the advertising out there. I'm glad we're serving dinner. That's a good one, you know, how can we make sure we pull people out one more time? And maybe another time after that, but.
I couldn't agree with you more, but my hope is that, given what I've heard from the committee since day one, we need to get into the nuts and bolts.
I totally agree.
And I think this is step one of nuts and bolts, leading into step two, which is how do we actually do this in Littleton? What are
I
those
totally
key
agree.
strategies?
Just want to make sure we get the people out to pick
I
their
agree with
brains.
you.
Yeah.
I mean, this is really one of the two really, really key opportunities on the implementation side.
Yeah.
I think we have a good understanding of the higher level vision, but now we need to drill down and really figure out how's the town gonna get from where we are today to where we want to be.
So maybe, Mr. Chairman, maybe on the November 15th meeting, we could talk about marketing strategies and employ a lot of the same ones we already did, but like Renato and Mike, can we get them out on LCTV? And, you know, we'll do our social media stuff and, you know, whatever. Let's just talk about ways to get the word out.
Yeah. And I asked Daphne to make sure that she holds the 15th so she could join us for that discussion. It'd be great to have her here since she's
Sure.
Architect
of this.
Hopefully I didn't lose my mind there. I guess what I'm looking at here, some of the things you've been speaking of, and God knows that you guys are talking about things that I never would have envisioned thinking about. But a lot of us came to Littleton, I forgot her name, the ma'am? All right, so you came to Littleton and you picked it, hopefully out of, 5 or 10 other towns, and you picked it for a reason. So now we're here and we have this reason to be here. And now we're talking about why do we want to stay here? Where do we want Littleton going in 15 years? And I think I mentioned once before is that I've heard goals have to have three things in order to be, obtained. They have to be measurable, believable, and obtainable. So you have to have, what do we want? Like in your determination, your statement, 40% of the town of Littleton has sidewalks and this, that, and the other stuff. And then we have the elderly that have a ride every hour, they get a place to where they want to go, they have something to do. That's someplace where we need to be. So that could be part of transportation, part of a goal that's necessary for the town, for us to aim towards. That's what I think part of this, the steering committee is, we're trying to steer the town towards something that the town not only wants to stay, but we also want to become. And with that, I think I love the fact you're getting all this information and everything, but now I really want to say, this is what you need to do to get to here. And the people that we speak to, that come to these meetings and come to the dinners and make their opinions, good, bad, or indifferent, they want to see Littleton get someplace. So I think that is more important sometimes than what do you like about it here, what have we done here, where are we going? That's, to me, is the most important thing about all this, and we spent a long time just talking about where we are. That's where we're going to go. And as far as, and again, there's multiple ways to try and protect those open spaces, and I think we need to address a lot of that. We need to address a lot of these things, but that's what I would like to see you more focus on, to be quite honest with you, the next meetings is, where do you want to be? Where do you want to be in 5 years? And don't tell me you want to be happy, because it ain't measurable, all right? Everyone wants to be happy. But that's all this, I've taken that, and I'm very impressed with all the work that everybody here has done, to be quite honest with you, very impressed. It takes a lot to get me excited.
Thanks, Peter. I want to offer one thing, when he comments, and it may just be nuance, but I just want to make sure we're straight on it. When you said that as the steering committee, we're steering the town towards something, we're really steering a process for the folks in town to
Well,
take in
that's
the
what I'm
direction
trying
they
to
want
say,
go.
that it's not saying, that's what we are here for, to try and take the statements of everybody and then put them into something that makes sense and then drive towards that. So I'm not saying, we're a steering committee. It's not, we're gonna sit there, right, in the back rooms, we're gonna say, we want everyone to say, we're gonna block off 485 and make it go around Littleton, so we have all that free. No, that's not what I'm trying. Hey, that's an idea, huh?
It is.
Just kidding. But that's my opinion on that, that's all. But again, thank you.
And you offer a good segue. We've got about 4 months left of active participation in getting a document produced, so that it's approved by the planning board sometime in April for presentation in May at town meeting. So if you think about it, we got November, December, holidays, January, February, and I'm thinking you're spending most of March putting it all together, making it look nice and pretty, and tying the bow around it, so to speak. So 4 months of active participation, or 13 years of commiserating. That's in one hand, one in the other. It's all of our choice. I certainly solicit and actively encourage the 4 months of active participation, so that it's 13 years of happiness.
Yes.
All right. Okay, do we have anything else on that, folks? All right, a little bit of board business. What I'd like you to do while we're doing board business, you got internet right now? Are you tied into the town? You want to plug my machine in? The only thing I want to do is I'd like you to show the web page.
Sure.
Is what I'd like you to do. All right. Marion, you mind? I've got internet connectivity here, if you just want to take it. I'll run us through the board business.
HDMI?
Huh?
Do you have HDMI?
Not on this puppy, no.
I do, I have it, the website. Where do you want me to go?
The planning website, the Plan Littleton website.
Yep.
We're not going to vote on minutes, and for folks who are doing public math out there, you can see that we do not have a quorum this evening. I suggested to the other committee members that we continue nevertheless. We're not deliberating on anything, we're not voting on anything, we're not distributing anything. This was information this evening for RKG, our associates, to get the information to you out in the public, rather than to delay that. Other committee members will be able to watch this on television. Other committee members have direct access to the consultants if they were to need to ask a question. And if it was a question that had bearing of broad interest, it's something we could document, and we can include that as part of our outreach program, and then certainly we could bring it up at our next meeting also. Plus, we're paying the consultants. So rather than to pay the consultants to be here tonight and then another night, it's a little bit of fiscal responsibility too on our part. So certainly I'd be open to any kind of criticism on that, and we could discuss it, but that's why I suggest the committee we continue without, or absent a quorum this evening. So I appreciate that consideration. Okay, so as far as board business goes, as I say, we will not vote on the minutes. Just a little bit of notice as to where we are financially. We're doing well. You folks, RKG, when I say you folks, have submitted a $30,000 bill to us, the invoice, and I guess that's in the process of being taken care of. And once that's paid, we'll be up to $54,360 paid to RKG out of the $150,000 contract. Spend rate, I would offer is reasonable as to where we are in this program. The next big part of this is certainly going to be the implementation piece of it, where they're going to be doing a lot of writing and actually putting the plan together. So looking good there. We're able to pay our staff member, so that's good news, right, Maren? So that's working well. What is outstanding, and we don't have the bill yet, is from the schools for the use of the facility. And that includes janitorial, labor, and any other incidentals that are associated with that. So we're looking for that piece to come through from the schools. And that's about it, folks. Maren will get this out to you, and then for the 15th, November, we'll have a much more formal budget presentation as to where we stand in spending the town's money. Okey-doke. How are we doing?
I was looking for the wired connection, and it's.
Oh, okay. We don't have the hard wire to do this tonight, folks. I apologize to you for that. Too bad we didn't have these wireless, huh? But life in the big city. Because then we would have done that. Okay. John, anything?
Nope.
Peter, anything?
I did my talking
You
already.
did. It was eloquent.
No, I'm also, thank you.
And this is not a knitting class, lady. Katie, anything you want to add?
No, no.
All right, thanks so much. I appreciate you coming on out tonight. Anna? Hi, Lauren? Peter, anything closing?
See you in November.
All right, go take care of Judy.
I can't. I have no way of
She's
getting
your
there.
ride.
Hey, it came up. Except I can't see what I'm doing necessarily. I don't see that. But, okay, sorry, PJ. I don't know what's happening.
No, okay.
I-
All right, thanks, folks. Have a great evening. I hope to see you at this planning forum. And come on out for the public meeting. And Katie will take us through a knitting class. All right, thanks.